idea what that is.
Okay, it's Dennis Harwich, Yarmouth.
Oh, no wonder.
Stretch.
I guess so. All right. I would like to have an explanation what happened with our real estate taxes. I've never had an increase like this before, since I've been here in 20 years. I mean, I've got almost a $300 increase this year. So what's causing this? Excuse me?
No, excuse us. This isn't question and answer time. You can make your comments. We're not here to answer every question that you have. It's not on our agenda tonight, and it's simple math.
I think the short answer is to fund the appropriations that were voted at town meeting.
Right.
I mean, this certainly doesn't include any possible new school building, right?
No,
To say nothing of wastewater.
no.
So what are I mean, I don't understand this. So what kind of increases are we to look forward to if you know, something that escapes most of us?
Vita, if you'd like, I can set up an appointment with you to speak with Ed Centeo to discuss your real estate bill. Okay?
Well, I can do that myself, but I
Okay.
mean, I just, I found it very upsetting.
And anyone else? Okay, we have a couple public hearings. The first one is a special entertainment license for the Friends of Yarmouth Council on Aging. Anybody here on that one?
Yes.
No, come up to the
Come
table.
up to the table,
Race it right there.
please. Good evening.
Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Could you introduce yourselves for the record, please?
Raymond Petruccelli, District 5.
Okay,
I'm the president of the Friends of the Yarmouth Council on Aging.
all right. And you?
I'm Diane Kane, the interim director of...
Thank you. Before you go on, let me read the public notice, which I have to do,
Okay,
and then it's yours, okay?
I agree.
The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the town of Yarmouth, has received an application from the Friends of Yarmouth Council on Aging for a special entertainment license for an LGBT anniversary concert to be held at the Yarmouth Senior Center, 528 Forest Road, South Yarmouth, Mass., on Sunday, October 20th, 2019. Entertainment will include live music with amplification between the hours of 7 and 10:30 p.m. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, September 10th, 2019, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Selectmen's meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted in the Selectmen's office until 4:30 p.m. on Friday, September 6, 2019. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. Okay.
Just one thing, it's our senior centers in West Yarmouth, not South Yarmouth.
Yeah, it says south on here.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
It's a small thing, yeah. Okay. So what we're doing, we're asking you to do it. This is a commemoration of something that was done 20 years ago. We're incorporating it, and we thought it would be a great thing to have some entertainment with it. The senior center came to the Friends to help guarantee the funding for these people because they don't work free like you guys do. So we agreed with that. They had put forward, and we're going to back them financially. We have received a certificate of insurance. There's no alcohol going to be served. Okay?
No, I saw that in the application.
And we have insurance just in case anyway, for the one day. In case
Okay.
some pile over there.
On the second page of this application, it says that the hours of entertainment are 7 until 10 p.m. In the notice, it says 7 to 10:30, which is correct?
7:30 to 10:30, I believe.
Well,
That wasn't one of the options.
yeah, you added 7:30. Both documents agree on 7, so
7 to 10.
7, 10 is good.
7 to 10 is all right, so, okay, so that, because that's what the application says, and then the notice said 10:30, so I just wanted to clarify which is correct, so it's 10.
I mean,
All
they
right.
were just considering for cleanup and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. And I noticed there's live music and amplification system, no alcohol, as you said, and that's about it, really, and we expect up to 270 guests potentially. What do you gonna use the overflow parking at the Old Town House Park?
If need be.
Yes,
I think you probably have to if you get that kind of a
yes.
response. I mean, hopefully you will, but who,
Yeah,
if you
we're
do.
trying to make this part, it's going to be a slight fundraiser too for us, so,
Yeah.
you know.
Is there anyone in the public wants to be heard on this matter? Nobody? Good.
Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the application as presented.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the application. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, passes
Thank you very
unanimously.
much.
Thank you.
Wish us luck, but we'll be all right.
Okay, have fun.
Don't forget to buy a ticket.
How
see
come
the
the VIP tickets cost more
Yeah,
than the
they're
regular
$5
tickets?
more.
They're closer to the stage.
Oh, okay.
They're all sold out anyway.
You're closer to stage, but the music's all recorded, isn't it?
No, it's
Huh? Oh, it's live. Oh, okay.
He doesn't.
All right, I thought you were, there's no good there, but all right. All right. And don't forget, I hang around with lawyers all day, so I just checking.
Yes, I will.
All right, so the second one is special entertainment license for Yarmouth Chamber Miniature Golf Tournament. Good evening.
Good evening.
What a gentleman.
I know.
You want to introduce yourselves for the record, please?
My name is Mary Vilbon, Executive Director for the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce.
Tom Nicanello, President of the Chamber. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll read the legal notice, and then you can go forward. The Town of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority for the Town of Yarmouth, has received an application from Mary Vilbon on behalf of the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce for a special entertainment license for a miniature golf tournament to be held at Skull Island Adventure Golf and Sports World, 934 Route 28, South Yarmouth, on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019, with a rain date of October 3rd. Entertainment will include recorded music with amplification between the hours of 3:30 and 8:30 p.m. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, September 10th, 2019, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Selectmen's meeting begins at 6. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 on Friday, September 6th. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing.
What's the scuttlebutt?
So I believe Tom was here a few weeks ago, and we had an application for a liquor license, for a one-day liquor license.
Right.
And this is basically a fun event that we're trying to do in town to get our business community together, celebrate the end of the season, and just have some nice family fun together after working really hard throughout the summer. The DJ that we're proposing to have at the event is the same DJ that works our annual cleanup day, Patrick DJ from Soundscape Mobile Entertainment. So he's very respected, well-known across the Cape.
And I'll be in the dunk tank.
Oh, no.
Oh, really?
That'll bring 'em in. Does anybody in the public want to be heard on this? Okay, seeing none. Questions from the board?
Make a motion, close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, motion second to close public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Make a
Go ahead.
motion to approve the application as presented.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.
DHY update. Who's got that one?
That'll be like a combination of Rich and I. In your packet, we provided for you tonight the present draft of the DHY partnership agreement. This is a document you've seen before, but it's been some time. But this is the operating parameters that if the district is approved or the entity is approved by the Commonwealth, this is the document that governs how it all operates. And if you recall, we had a subcommittee of the chair of the board, and at the time, Selectman Stone, the finance chair, and Kurt Sears all were on the negotiating group as part of that. And every town had a similar set of counterparts associated with that. So we're at a point now where this will be presented to you officially again on the 19th, when we all come together with the three towns in Harwich. Recall, next Tuesday, the 17th, we plan to have Dave Young in attendance to refresh some of the dialogue. Dave is kind of like the common link between the three communities, as he's been going over the years between the three to talk and work through this agreement. So he will walk you through the agreement and any last-minute questions you might have on next Tuesday, the 17th, in advance of the three-town meeting on the 19th. Additionally, in here is also the draft legislation that has cleared the House, and I recently heard today from Senator Sears' office, because it's in the Senate now, so it's been assigned in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate. And it appears that they're working to get this through the Senate sometime in October, early part of October, which is a bit of an issue for us in that the plan had been that the three towns would have the same vote for the agreement scheduled for their fall town meeting, but the legislation took so long. But it does look like it's within about 3 to 4 weeks of being passed in the Senate. So that's the legislation that establishes a DHY district.
What's the danger of of them passing something different from what's been presented?
Yeah, so that's a really good question.
Town meeting.
It has been explained to the Senate Council, because it had gone through quite a massaging by the House Council. Two different councils in the House of Representatives worked on this. But it won't change anything that's of any great significance. Senate Council's been briefed as it relates. This is something that, it's essentially the same legislation that generated the Mansfield, Norton, and Foxborough agreement. So I don't anticipate that would happen at this point. It's now just a matter of getting a hearing scheduled with the Senate, getting that done, taking the vote, and moving it to the governor's desk. So that, again, that just enables the district to be established. The key parts that legislation has within it is the governance document, which is in the agreement amongst the three towns. That's like an exhibit to that legislation. So that's really what we're going to focus in on the 17th and the 19th. And that could still change to some degree based on the three towns coming together. But the legislation, it was designed such that that's where all the detail would be. The legislation just created the legal framework to establish a district if the three towns decided that's what they wanted to do.
I mean, our original intent was to be able to take this up at our town meeting
Yeah.
at the end of October,
Right.
but Harwich has said they're not going to do that anyway.
That's right. So it's essentially kind of a moot point. We've gone back and reported to the three groups, or to the group, the main DHY group, that we think there's more work that needs to be done here in Yarmouth. Harwich was not, they don't have a history of a fall town meeting anyways, and they know that that was going to be a challenge for them. So at this point, what we're doing is gearing up to, hopefully this will get through the Senate, and then we'll spend the intercession between October and March thereabouts with a public outreach effort, and continue to refine our effort too, because we're doing a parallel track. Not only is there a DHY option to be considered, there's also, if that didn't occur, a Yarmouth-only option. So there's a lot of engineering work still to do and some estimates, and that'll all get refined over the winter. And a lot more public outreach for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Rich or Mark?
Just there was a plain language summary that was written up that accompanied the documents that's in the packet. And so the public was interested in not reading the legalese and some of the language that's in the actual agreement. There is something that explains it a little more easily. And it's also be found at the DHY group created a website. It's dhycleanwaters.org, and all these documents are also on that website.
Okay. I have a question. There's highlights in our packet. What are the purposes of the highlights?
I believe most of the highlights.
Page 5 of the summary that's in advance with highlights in particular a lot of the flow allocations.
Right, most of the highlights are relating to those flow allocations, because it was still to be determined by each community how much flow they want to provide for within their build-out, which would dictate the size of the plant, which would then dictate the sharing of percentages between the three communities. And so as we go through, particularly next week and beyond, that will be part of the presentation of information as to what Yarmouth picked for its build-out flows, which provides for some amount of new growth within that, and how that compares amongst the other communities and what, in general, other communities have done.
These build-out flows have a tendency to be more or less about double what the initial total flow allocations are. For example, Dennis goes from 1.0 million gallons a day to 1.9. Harwich goes from 0.45 to 0.90. Yarmouth goes from 1.55 to 3.00. And can you explain how those build-out calculations are arrived at?
Yeah, I don't think that's referring to what was initially planned versus a change. I think it's referring to perhaps the first phase of the plant to handle the first 2 or 3 phases.
I understand
versus
that,
the
but
final build-out.
I understand that part of it, but I mean, mathematically, they seem to be approximately double the initial calculations, and I'm wondering.
Oh, sure. I think that represents, I think in the 8-phase plan, I think right now, and this is a good design point for Dave Young to speak to next week, that the plant is designed initially for the first 3 or 4 phases with an upgrade about halfway through the plan of 40 years to accommodate the future growth beyond that. So that would kind of make sense if you're taking half, because each phase is approximately the same amount of gallon per day flow.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a lot of information here. I don't know any of the background as to how we got to any of this, so, I could go through it, or we
No,
can-
that's why we decided at the last meeting, I think it was, that it would be best, because it's been such a long time since they all had a review of this, that we bring Dave in on the 17th.
I don't think we've seen this document at all before.
Yes, well, there's the agreement. Yeah, so the what I would call to Rich's point, the plain language summary's probably new, but the draft agreement, we actually presented to the board early last spring, I believe it was. There's been very little changes to that, but it's definitely, it's been a while since you saw it, so we wanted to make sure that, take the documents home, over the next week, you can sift through them, and then if any questions you have, if you want to send them to me ahead of time by email so Dave can be prepared with answers to make the best use of the time on Tuesday, that would be great. But the whole idea is to make sure you had this well in advance of the three-town meeting on that Thursday night.
Well, until we get the finances behind it,
That's true.
I'm not really interested in looking at it at all, because it may not even be something that's a great idea for us to do. So that's something I think we need to know before we forge forward on this path. But,
We kind of bought ourselves a year because Harwich isn't ready, so.
Yeah, it helps us, actually.
Right.
Yeah, no question about it. And as we mentioned in a past update, due to the UMass study, and we reevaluated some additional flow concerns that we had, so our gallons per day went up a little bit, which throws out of balance some of the cost projections. So we also, by having the winter to digest some of the short-term rental tax and follow the development of the Water Protection Trust, we'll have a better understanding of those finance tools by the Springtown meeting than we did right now, so.
so this is gonna be, so we're at 3 members with 50%
Yeah.
of the flow.
Yeah, so the whole idea behind the 19th is to update all 3 communities as to what the status is. That's really all
So
it is.
I can hold my questions to after that, or is it gonna be too late at that point?
No, there'll be another opportunity after that, when all the numbers are known and flushed out, so to speak, to weigh in again. There'll be another meeting. We haven't talked about it as a group yet, but there'll be another opportunity, certainly amongst the 3 towns, but at any time during our local process, you feel free to send me questions, and we can ask those and get those answered for you.
The 2 meetings next week will help to answer a lot of
I
questions.
bet they will, yeah.
But again, to Tracy's point, the numbers don't work. This whole exercise is pointless.
Well, that's why we are continuing to go down the Yarmouth-only track, just in the situation where that could occur potentially. Yeah, you're
So
right.
when do we find out what the numbers, how they compare?
Rich, you got an idea on that?
We have recently just got some estimates now, which I don't want to quote off the top of my head, because I don't want it to be wrong, but that certainly will be part of the presentation for next Tuesday.
Can you tell us, if is Yarmouth's go alone option comparable to Yarmouth's partnership option?
There's a savings in the partnership on the capital side of less than 10%. But there are the savings projected, and this is why we should probably wait to the update and the Q&A for next week. But the savings for Yarmouth presents itself on the operating side, and so you got to weigh how soon do you realize those costs on an operating basis, since you're not building out the plant at full capacity on day 1, right? And so what CDM has done is converted the capital and the operating to at a calculation they do to convert it to an annual cost, combining both numbers into it. And so you can compare it better on that basis. But that is going to be part of the presentation.
That will be?
Yep.
That's part of next Tuesday's presentation?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
'Cause
Well,
one of the-
I have to follow up with CDM. I just got the call today, so I have to call them back tomorrow to finalize or propose what that draft agenda looks like. But we've been talking all along, and that's been part of it. So.
Yeah. The other aspect that is we're trying to quantify a little bit better is if we had a partnership model, the loan through the state's revolving account could be potentially a 0% loan, which would save you some money, and then there's principal forgiveness as part of that. So we've asked for a little bit more further detail on what that analysis would mean to us.
I have just a, top-level question about allocation of costs, and that is that, 52%, based on that chart, of the cost of capital would be allocated to Yarmouth. And the way the formulas are, I think most of the budget, end up being close to 52%, will be allocated to Yarmouth because it's based upon capacity flows, not based upon actual flows. So where is the savings potential then? I'm having trouble visualizing how we could have savings operationally if we're not going to have significant savings on capital. Because I would think that they would be similar. Now, maybe the difference is in the building of the transmission lines, but do you understand where I'm coming from? Yeah, okay.
I thought David said earlier, Norm, that that's why the savings weren't going to be that significant on the capital side, because of the lines that were going to have to be run from Yarmouth to Dennis when they build the collection system, and back for the treated water.
Yeah, there's some offsets on that, though, with regard to the the costs of where the effluent is going to be disposed of. And
I might
and
just
that's
add, I asked Dave on Friday to give us a further analysis of a potential Phase 1 effluent recharge in Harwich.
Okay.
Yeah, some preliminary information that came back from, on the Gulf analysis has led me to ask Dave to provide an option to send Phase 1 to Harwich.
Okay.
Yeah. The cost is, it's one of those things, it's so complicated because you're now dealing with a partner to ask to finance what would be a pretty significant infrastructure overhaul over there at Bass River, that I think it would be more appropriate with that conversation to find out if we went to an undeveloped parcel that they've already identified, send it to Harwich, so we don't overtop our golf situation.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know how long it'll take to get that analysis done, but the Harwich option was going to be later in the project. It's about 1 million gallons per day of recharge.
Okay.
And it certainly could work this early on in our project.
I think that has some wisdom, Dan. Adding that complication of a tear up of Bass River, I think is something
Problematic on a lot of
be
fronts. Yeah.
tough to swallow for some people. Yeah. Okay.
So that may take a while to run that calculation, but that's out there now.
One of the things I don't see is is any cap in administrative percentage of overall budget, which I think is important. I'm not sure how they come up with their contracts or whatever, but it would be nice to see a cap on administrative costs overall. I think a lot of the nonprofits or other organizations that you see have that. And the other thing I'm concerned about is the possible pilot on this land.
It was agreed some time ago that we wouldn't pilot each other.
In this agreement?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it in the,
Yeah, that was raised early on, but everybody's got a role to play here, so we decided to take that conversation out of the mix. Yeah.
what do you mean?
Well, Dennis is the host of the plant, right?
Correct.
We're a recharge area, and Harwich eventually would have recharge area. And between the three communities at the DHY subgroup that we had, we hashed that out pretty
But that's in this
significantly.
document?
I believe language was added in there. I'd have to go back and see where that was, but that was a discussion that we had at that group level.
Okay, just to make
That
sure it made it
resulted
in
in
here.
some language being added, but it's been quite some time, so.
Yeah. Well, that's why we wanted to bring Dave back and walk everybody through the whole thing on the
Okay, so
17th.
I'll write down,
question.
Yeah.
I'll write down my
Yeah,
questions.
that'd be great.
All right, any further questions or comments on this? The DHY update? All right, we'll go to 7 o'clock item, Water Infrastructure and Investment Fund. Discussion with CPC.
Is all the members of the CPC that wanted to be part of the meeting here? Gary, you might want a chair.
No, I'm going to try and keep this short to get to the point of why I think we're here tonight. So it has more to do, and I'll sum it up. I'm going to go through my outline, and then I'm going to talk about, at the end, I think, ultimately, we feel we don't have enough time to prepare for this. We were taken aback by the presentation, I believe, that went to you at reducing us to 1.5, and I mean, my committee doesn't want me to say it, but I was personally did not appreciate that because nobody ever came to us with that. And that was not my discussion with some of the people in town. So
Can I just respond to that? Because I'm surprised that you weren't aware. I apologize for that. But this has been, I believe that was laid out in our plan with Bill Hinchy before that was part of his cost recovery plan years ago.
Yep.
So
I had discussions, and I don't want to get into this personally, but my discussions were Richard. We were talking about maybe going to 2 and 2, but having a discussion on this. My point is, it was never discussed with our committee, who had the greatest impact on not only our committee, but the potential projects we have down the line.
No.
And I
Gary,
don't.
aren't we here for that purpose tonight? We have not, as far as I know, take any vote on this
haven't.
issue. I know that individual members have met with Rich Bienvenu to consider a whole variety of funding options, and nothing's been settled. So I really don't understand what the prejudice is to your committee. I understand what you're saying, and that you wish you were brought into the discussion earlier, but
Correct.
There's nothing that's really happened yet.
If I may, before everybody goes on, just so that everybody's clear here, the administration was given a mandate to try to finance the cost of this activity without a debt exclusion. So as part of that, as many of you know, the financing equations were pretty fluid. And one of the ideas that was trialed out in other communities, and I know I've spoke to a number of members on the CPC committee, was what if you did something like this, because like this it was done in other communities. For planning purposes, in order to get a financing model so that we could have a discussion point to start with, we plugged in, because it was something that was known that we knew what the dollar value was, a 1.5%. That was never meant to say that it would be that, or it would be something different than that. Everybody was very clear here that it's a multi-step process, that the Board of Selectmen has to weigh in on it, town meeting has to weigh in on it, the CPC has to weigh in on it, and then ultimately it's got to go to a ballot question. But from an administrative perspective, we had to come up with the general outlines of what financing would look like. So this is the official starting point of that conversation as we begin to roll down towards next spring's town meeting, if the town so decides it wants to use this tool as a financing measure.
And I think basically that's the CPC's feeling at this point. We'd like to make sure that it goes to spring, that we don't rush this into an October meeting.
No, there should never have been any issue, and I've never said it would be in October. We talked about with legislation, but not about the CPC, because we didn't think we had enough time. I've been very clear that we
don't have enough time.
That's
and
right.
that was not relayed to us. That is not the way we understood it. And I don't want to get into...
So, Gary, see all the benefits of you coming here tonight? First of all, you've gotten educated on where we are in this process.
I guess my feeling is, Mike, don't you think we should have been told this before we had to come here?
Gary, these issues and concepts have come up at a number of public meetings, some of which I attended. There was one at the senior center not too long ago, and cultural center, where these kinds of options were discussed. And this isn't the only funding option. There was all kinds of...
Oh, there are. But the main thing we're asking for, and I'm just going to go through my points, is if we go to the spring, that'll give us time to have more outreach, and I want you to understand the ramifications of even 0.5% with CPC and potential projects coming down the line.
Which I assume you're going to tell us about tonight.
What am I going to tell you about?
The ramifications.
Well, I'm not going to get into the details, but I'm going to list the projects that would be affected. for us to open the discussion and talk about it, and then we'll have more public outreach. We've only had one committee meeting to talk about this since it came up. Yes. So, anyways, let me just go through my outline, and then that's the main thing we're asking for, is that it not be considered till spring. That will give us a chance to come back to you and explain the ramifications. And Mike has done a great job putting together the figures of every 0.5% change to CPC, what it affects. And there's a lot to it, so we need to think about it. So if you don't mind, let me just go through my outline. So CPA has been in place since 2005 and has provided funding for projects in 4 categories, I think you all know, for spending, which is affordable housing, historic, open space, and recreation. We have a dedicated committee that takes their job seriously and puts a great deal of time into the review of the applications. Before discussing the WIF and understanding the Board of Selectmen would like to move CPA articles as well as zoning to a fall town meeting, I'd like to make note that the CPC, in discussion with the town administrator's office, memo is in your packet, is moving forward with grant rounds for this fall as in our normal schedule. That means we're still going to accept our applications on our deadline, which would come in the spring. Applications are due on October 4th and will be considered in the 2020 Springtown meeting. Based on the outcome of the WIF notes, the CPC will make available new funding with applications reviewed late spring 2020 and voted in fall 2020. So I think basically what we're saying, we don't really mind moving it to fall for CPC, but for this grant round, to do it now is a hardship on the applicants and our committee. The committee always considers the Board of Selectmen's goals when making recommendations. CPA funds have helped to move along a number of projects that have catalyzed big improvements for the town. I'm going to name the Cultural Center, the Pickleball, Motel redevelopment, affordable housing program, the Yarmouth New Church, Packet Landing. We have the drive-in site, Taylor Bray Farm, Cape Cod Rail Trail, historic preservation across all of Yarmouth, the Parkers River Bridge, Baxter Gristmill, Yankee Village, and the Sailing Center. Without CPC funding, many of these projects would not have happened, and many wouldn't be far along as they are today. Without CPA funding, projects like these may not be able to move forward. So some of these projects are in different stages of development. They are not done yet. CPA funds are consistently used as seed money and used to provide funds that make the town eligible to seek grants that require matching funds. CPA funds demonstrate significant local support for projects and make these grant applications very competitive. Community preservation funds have been used to preserve open space and as such have already provided a source of funding to improve water quality, which is what we're talking about ultimately with the WIF. Some projects to consider that have helped improve to a great deal the water quality would be the Parkers Rivers Bridge, the Baxter Gristmill, Chapin Beach, Phragmites removal all over it, separate projects around town, the Mill Creek Park, Dennis Pond, Yankee Village, Starbuck Lane, Alms House Road, and Pheasant Cove. All of these have contributed to our water quality improvement. Probably more, our committee has done more in this than any other thing in town. So you need to think about those ramifications also. You know, the Parkers River Bridge, it is said once we do that, it could reduce the nitrogen in the pond by 90%. And that's ultimately where what we're working towards. The Community Preservation Committee understands and appreciates the need for waterway wastewater infrastructure and also appreciates the concept of minimizing the cost of the infrastructure to the taxpayers. Before moving forward with any proposals to shift costs, the committee believes that there should be meaningful dialogue about the pros and cons of shifting revenues away from CPA to the WIF. While there has been informal discussions of this topic, without Board of Selectmen direction, the conversation has not occurred between town committees or been extended to the public for input. I suggest that any town meeting articles to establish a WIF and/or reduce the CPA funding be held off until spring town meeting, and any corresponding vote for that be made at the spring election. This will give thoughtful time to access the town and community demand for CPA project funding and discuss the ramifications of any reduction to CPA. Thanks. So that is our committee's feeling at this point, and that's our input. And I've had this discussion. I met with Rich a few times, and we've had this discussion.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of him or any responses? Eric?
Gar-
To the board or the public?
It's not a public
It's not a
hearing.
Talking to the board.
So I'm not positive that it was clear, Gary, at the beginning, but this isn't going to be, or considered for the fall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's not necessarily correct.
Well,
that's
it's on the document for a placeholder in many aspects on a lot of the wastewater front. When we were planning this months ago, we thought we'd be further along in the process. What we wanted to be able to do to preserve to the board are your options, because if we didn't put a placeholder on there, then you couldn't bring it up necessarily. But, so it's there as kind of a default, so.
See, so if it's clear to you,
But that
Eric,
has to do
obviously
with-
it's not
Well-
even clear to your own board.
Well,
It's not clear to
that's
me.
why I brought it up, because I thought it was clear, but apparently it wasn't.
Apparently not.
So I think, out of fairness to the Community Preservation Committee, I think this board needs to make a decision tonight as to whether or not we intend to bring this to fall or to postpone it to next spring. Because it essentially, if it's done if we were to vote it this fall, does it have any impact on this round of, on their October 4th?
No, it has to ultimately get through town meeting and a ballot question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you did it next spring, say, it still needs to get to a ballot question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, I'm confused. Are we talking about the DHY agreement?
No.
No. We're talking
So-
about setting up a wastewater infrastructure fund. They're two different things. One,
This one
setting
and
up the
one
fund,
plus-
and the other one would be the conversation of transitioning percentage or whatever to
To that fund.
put in the fund.
Yeah.
So there's really two different things.
Or you
What I'm
could-
hearing from you is you don't even want us to talk about the fund at this town meeting?
Well, how you're going to fund it.
It
If
doesn't
you-
matter. I mean, setting it up, we set up funds that.
It does matter, you can fund it, but then if you don't want to have the discussion about reducing CPA, we're asking that not be taken up till spring.
Okay, that's what, but that's
So if
not
you
what I
wanna-
heard.
Okay, if you want to set up the fund, I think we're all for that, we know we have to do that.
We do that
That's-
a lot, Gary. We set up funds in anticipation of funding them.
My point being, you're acting like I should have known this.
Right.
No,
You
we're having a
guys don't know
conversation.
yourself.
That's right,
okay?
because we're having a discussion. It's still in the discussion phase, so I'm glad you're here. Glad
Yep.
we're going to talk about this. But the wastewater infrastructure fund has to go to the legislation after it passes, correct? Is that fund set up by statute, or how does that work?
So you have to pass it at town meeting and you also have to pass a percentage surcharge on your real estate tax.
At the same time?
At the same
You
time.
can't set up the fund without the,
No, my understanding is it needs to be done together. Yes, Rich?
That's correct. You need to identify a percentage.
source.
Yes, source,
There's
A
no, the source
percentage.
is a property tax surcharge.
surcharge.
You have to identify the amount of that surcharge up to 3%.
So you could have potentially, bear with me here, 3% CPA surcharge and a 3% totally new surcharge associated with the WIF. You could, up to 3%.
The other thing to consider too, Dan, you know, we've talked about it, you could also lose on both of them.
Well, you could, I mean, because you could pass at town meeting and both ballot questions could get turned away, there's no question.
And you'd lose both. So
That's why this
that's
is
why
complicated.
we feel this needs more discussion.
It definitely needs more discussion, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, I know that you're very passionate about what you do. I think the CPA is a great thing. It's done a lot of great things. But honestly, in my opinion, if we don't move forward on wastewater at this point in time, all that really is, you know, the affordable housing and all that is, we're really jeopardizing our
Well, it all-
environment
you know,
and everything that goes with it. So
I do want to make my point, because I brought it up to you before, and this is my feeling. If we're trying to run the town of Yarmouth as a business, which ultimately you are, it all comes down to money. If this was a restaurant and your septic system failed, would you take all your money from marketing and put into the septic system and not do any marketing? I consider...
yeah, I would actually, because without
You
the
wouldn't
septic
last
system,
long.
you're not going to last for long without a septic system. You're going to be closed.
No.
It doesn't work like that.
Then you have to pay more for it.
Well, I mean, I appreciate what your comment is, but I think that at some point in time, because of the length that it takes us so long to even have the conversation, we have no idea where the community's even at on it, but I think it's a valid conversation to have, even if it fails, to start to educate people about what we're trying to do. I mean,
So
we have-
my question, so what difference would 6 months make?
Well, what difference has 20 years made?
Well, at this point, we're talking a big future for the town, so we would like to have more input and have more input into what's being done before you propose it. And that's my main reason for being here tonight.
Okay, well, tonight was the first I heard that the wastewater infrastructure had to come with a funding source. That's the first I've heard that, so.
Shouldn't be like that, but
If we're not going to be doing a CPA at this town meeting, then it's all for nothing.
Very honestly, I can't imagine this passing at town meeting with simply a statement that a 3% surcharge on real estate tax levy is going to be in it.
No.
Won't pass.
That's,
Well, all I'm saying is that's what's here.
Yeah, well, it's up to 3%.
You know what town meeting will say? That it's 3%.
that's not.
And town meeting will
Oh,
lose control.
You're
at that
talking
point.
about without having a specified rate
Right.
of contribution? Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Right. You know, town meeting asked to consider this
Yeah.
without realistic funding mechanisms that will limit that to a certain amount.
From a
Town
specific source.
meeting will say, we decided this before.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I think you need a specific amount from a specific identifiable source
Right.
to put it
Yep.
all together as one article.
Yeah, so what they did in Sandwich, to go one step further with that, from talking to the administration over there, they not only identified the source of the funding, and they did a 2 and a 2, a 2% surcharge for the WIF. They reduced the CPA from 3 to 2, and so essentially in Sandwich, it goes from 3% to 4%. But they also, to go one step further, they took all the money that was to be generated by those surcharges and connected them to very specific projects so people could see the synergy between the two. This surcharge pays for this project, and we're ways away from that concept right now. And they did it in a two-step part. One would be in a town meeting, and then many, many months later, the ballot question. And to this point, I don't think they've got their ballot question done yet either. Oh, did they? Yeah.
Wasn't there another town, Rich, that went 2-2?
Several towns are considering it, yeah. One town's considering keeping their 3% CPA surcharge and just adopting a water infrastructure fund surcharge just as an addition
On top of it.
on
Yeah.
top of it.
So there's a lot of different models that have been tried or being in process of trying around us on this particular topic.
So it will, if it is reduced to 1.5%, it's going to affect a lot of the town projects that are, I'm going to say, halfway done. including the drive-in
How
site.
can that be? If they've already-
Drive-in site.
How can they?
There's one.
But that's already been funded, hasn't it?
No.
Partial.
No, it hasn't. Half of it.
So you funded it in anticipation of future revenues?
Yeah. But we
wait a
didn't
minute, wait a
vote
minute,
the
wait a
future
minute.
revenues, but they are looking for more money.
Wait a minute, that whole discussion was, let's ask the town to step up and fund part of it so that we can demonstrate our support for the project, and so we can go out and find other funding
Correct.
sources. It was not, oh, by the way, this is halfway for the town. It
Well, the
was so that they could-
driving committee, I don't believe is here to speak about that, but our intent was we'd give them half of it last year, and then because it was going to take 3 years to go forward, we'd give them more so they had more seed money. I'm just
I
saying,
don't think that was the communication to this board.
That wasn't my understanding.
That was my understanding, certainly.
well, it was an understanding with us. Like, if you needed more money, come back to us, and then as you get further along in the process, and I'm just using that for an example. That's one project that is going to be impacted a great deal.
Yeah, but Gary, you need to understand when you say that there are things that have currently been approved and are currently underway that are going to be affected, that shouldn't be. I mean, it may very well affect projects that you haven't yet seen or approved or decided to
Well, it does
fund.
those too, but yes, it does.
But
I
you
mean,
can't sit here and tell us that it's going to
Well,
affect things that have already been
I don't want to
voted on
keep
by
going through all the
taxpayers.
examples. You got Baxter Mill. We'll get the dam done, then you're going to put that old building back on top of it.
But wasn't that in the original appropriation that was passed by town
No.
meeting? It wasn't?
No, it was for the dam itself.
So.
Because it
there's
made
going
no
to
sense to think about what we're going to do with the building until we put it back on the dam, and then we consider what we're going to do with the building,
be-
correct?
What happens if you go to town meeting for the money to put the building back and it doesn't pass?
Well, the building will go back, but there won't be any money to improve it. So we could sit here all night and go through it project by project, but that's not my intent of being here tonight. I was asking for more time to consider these projects, correct?
I think your example is, sorry, I think one of a better example maybe is some of the funding has been used for design and engineering at Sandy Pond. It was just the most recent approval. And so that work is being designed and engineered, but hasn't been funded yet. So I think that's maybe a better example. The gristmill, just for the record, is where it was. It didn't move.
So when, and forgive me for my ignorance, when town meeting votes to fund these things, are they voting to fund them with monies that you already have or are guaranteed to have, or monies that you really don't know if you're going to get, you're just hoping you're going to get?
No, I think town meeting can only approve funding that's either been received and in the bank or anticipated receipts for the coming fiscal year. I don't think, and Rich, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we can commit money we don't have or have no
Well, we've never done
kind
that
of
to begin
ownership.
with.
Right.
We've
All
never
the
done
articles
that.
voted in the past, with some small exception, I think maybe it was last year or 2 years ago, are voted from available funds.
Right.
And this practice in Yarmouth hasn't been to vote from anticipated receipts. Some communities do that, but that hasn't really happened to any large extent here in Yarmouth.
So how can you tell me that this is going to affect projects that have already been approved?
I'm talking about the ideal hope was, like, if I take Baxter Mill for one, once the dam is put back together and we've improved the water, then we would restore the building. We don't know what we want to do with the building at this point. You can put it back down, leave it the way it is, but wouldn't it ultimately make sense to renovate that building? So you can say no and not do it. I don't care. You could turn it down at town meeting. But it was always our thought that maybe further down the line they would come back and come up with a proposal to renovate the actual mill.
So, but we're talking about 1.5%. You're still going to have 1.5% in some of the state reimbursement. I'm sure, obviously, the reimbursement would be less, but it's not like you're not going to have any money. You just, I mean, it's less, it's unfortunate, but I think, we've made a commitment that we have to find ways to do this without impacting the taxes.
Will be the
And there's nobody is not a winner You know what I mean?
No, but
We're not trying to do anything, I think that's gonna
I
be
believe
detrimental
we'd
to
be the
anybody.
first town to go to 1.5, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a decision we have to make at some
the
point.
0.5% affects our, our staff. We cannot afford to carry Mike Barry at that. And if we don't have an administrator, and they've assured me they'll find a way to fund it, but if they don't, I'm not going to do what I do and try and do his job. So there are implications. That's what I'm trying to suggest. We should think about all
Yeah,
these.
we need to have all that laid out in front of us so we can make a decision. I
Right.
agree.
And we can get a case, and there's people here with CPA projects who are here today, and they'd like to speak, but I don't want to get off on that track because I was just looking for the time extension tonight. I thought that was important.
So can we go back to that? I mean, I'm still no closer to knowing if we have to do this fall than I was 20 minutes ago when I asked the original
We
question.
don't have to do anything. I mean, we could do nothing.
Well, it sounds like it might be more important to get the ball rolling than I originally thought it was. I mean, are we under any kind of pressure, or are there implications to not doing it this fall and waiting till the spring? Ultimately, I don't know if the extra time is going to matter because, we have an obligation to do what we need to do. And if this is, the funding source that we're going to adopt, then, I respect the fact that your board would like extra time, Gary, but I don't know that we are on the same timing track.
Where you got to admit, even if that was the case and you were going to go to this fall, then maybe you could have told us about this in the spring.
Well, so
Here we are.
we can go back and forth about that, but I don't want to.
We can, but I put a lot of time into this, and our committee has.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say, I didn't hear about it till August. I vacation in August. So when I get back, I am told that this has been proposed, and within a couple of weeks, I have to be here.
No, my understanding, Gary, if I could, is that the chairman of the Water Resources Advisory Committee addressed your group back in June, my understanding is. Rich did. And then we worked all summer on this concept, and we were told that you took the summer off. We've been on just under, from an administrative perspective, we've been under just to get all of this marshaled forward so you could have a public dialogue about it. Nothing has ever been set in stone. And to answer, to the best of my knowledge, Selectman Tolly's point about are we under any gun on this, you might hear on the 19th from some folks that the Conservation Law Foundation isn't happy with the progress that's being made amongst the Cape Towns. I personally don't respond well to threats of litigation, and ultimately the town of Yarmouth will move when the town of Yarmouth is ready to move somewhere. I can't answer that as an individual, though, for the board as whether or not that's a real or imagined threat, but I've heard that a number of times. I have said, and I've been pretty clear, as this project, as we continue to add more wastewater capacity, continue to vet out a Yarmouth-owned solution, I'm just not comfortable putting forward to you what the cost of this is, what's the best option yet, and how best way to finance it. But we've been trying to work all of these concepts together so we can get enough information to you so we can start, to Gary's point, this very needed public dialogue on how to get this thing done if we are committed to getting it done.
And if
It's
I
huge.
could add, whether you voted at a fall town meeting or a May town meeting, it would be for implementation at whichever date you decide. So for example, July 1, 2020. So whether you did it now or later, doesn't change that date, or you can pick a future date.
So in terms of your financial projections that you've used to be able to fund the project without the taxes, where did you kick in that?
In the projection, it does have it starting in FY '21, so next year.
Okay.
But again, you could do that in May and still have it in place for July 1, 2020. And I guess the other point I just wanted to raise, kind of the reason I think it might have been originally on the track for a fall town meeting, is that was the track of when DHY was going to be considered. And so why would you decide to approve joining DHY, which means you're on the hook for paying for that,
Right.
and then not vote the funding at the same time? So now that DHY seems to have moved off of the fall, you're not really, you're on different tracks now, potentially.
But the creation of the fund and putting the money into it is the reason that we were trying to fast track it was to build up the revenue so we didn't have to borrow to pay the first set of loans when it comes. How else are we gonna do that?
The benefit of having it
When will we have to borrow
July
first?
1, 2020 was to bank the money, to build it up, to smooth out any valleys, shortfalls in the funding plan in a given year, depending on economic conditions. But for the projections, our debt service wasn't projected to start until fiscal year 2025. So we are hoping to bank 4 years of this money.
There is, I might add, a caveat to that. The Route 28 DOT project may require us to find some money to put pipes in the ground in advance of having a positive decision on either one of these.
Right.
So that, and that's millions of dollars. I mean,
And
I
people
don't,
need to understand, if they do that and they pave that road, we can't touch it for another 5 years.
That's
It
correct.
sets us back
yeah.
in our plan.
And that sets us way back in the plan, that's correct. So, and, you know, there's a lot of complexity to this, and the Route 28 issue, I think we've got a little bit of breathing room. We're gonna ask Dave to give you a little bit of an update on that on the 17th. But the reality is that sooner rather than later, we may need to come up with a few $1 million as DOT goes down the process to drop some pipes in the ground. They would do it while they're there. It would never be any cheaper, if you can use that word, on these types of projects to do it then. And right now, we don't have any reserve money built up for that.
Well, maybe sometime we could leave the placeholder, and this is just my feeling, and you can come back and we can talk a little bit more of what that dollar means to them, what the detriments could be, and
Oh, absolutely.
whether or not we're actually prepared for this before we make a decision, because I'm not sure, based on some of the comments that you've made, that we're actually ready to move forward with this.
I wish that things were a little bit more clear than they are right now, but it is what it is, and I think we'll have a better end product if we wait. But, you know, one of the things, when you're talking about engaging the community, because this is a huge community conversation, what other better opportunity than at a town meeting to discuss this and bring people up to date? You know, Rich has been doing a good job with the Water Resources Advisory Committee reaching out in very small pockets of the citizens, but those aren't necessarily reflective of who's going to appear at town meeting, you know? So the more opportunities to discuss this in a large public forum is probably the better at this point.
So it's not like zoning, if it fails, you can't bring it back for 2 years. So is it worthy of having the conversation and getting the input from the public?
I think you
or-
can get it, and then if somebody makes a motion to table it till the next town meeting, if we have further information. I just don't know the best format, short of that, where you're going to have a few hundred people weigh in on this particular topic and get what their sentiment is. Because
So
ultimately, it
this
has
has
to
to
pass a
go
ballot
through
question.
town meeting and a vote?
And a ballot question, that's correct.
And a ballot vote.
Yeah.
And it
know,
also add.
I'd like to make a comment to Gary about, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to get my head around is where's the rest of the iceberg? We're dealing with pieces of it that are showing above the water, and you've been talking about all the pieces that are out there under the water. You know, with a lot of the town projects that we have right now, they're all sitting out there. We know what we have to invest. We know what the impact is going to be on our taxpayers. And we've identified the dollar impact to our taxpayers. And what I hear you talking about are things that have not been identified. And at some point, besides CPC funding, the implication that I'm hearing is that there also will be requests of the taxpayers to fund additional capital costs with those projects.
Well, there's going to be one way or the other. I mean,
Well,
I just
well,
going,
let me just continue. I'm uncomfortable at this point because we're placing tremendous demands on our taxpayers at this point with the tech school, with a DPW building, with a new school, already identified at $117 million, with an elementary school project that is sitting out there potentially for the near future, and wastewater with big dollars identified already in that process. And I'm very concerned about what's underwater here in CPC projects that have not been identified, that you folks apparently are talking about. Very concerned.
Well, no, we only deal with the money we have year to year. And I just identified for you, I think I have 10 projects here that contributed to wastewater cleanup on projects that we funded.
I'm not disputing that.
We can't have somebody go out there and measure, like, when you do this project, well, how did that help the nitrogen? Common sense would tell you, and we have estimates of the nitrogen impact. If you want to talk about the easy hanging fruit, if you really want to clean up the water, perhaps taking Yankee Village down, which sitting in the water, contributes more to the pollution of Mill Pond than any septic system's ever going to. And that's just one, and I identified 10 of them.
Mr. Chairman, can I don't think, I think we all appreciate the work that the committee does, and I don't think anybody's questioning the value of those investments. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to assess the viability of establishing a municipal water infrastructure investment fund, and if we could set it up in such a way where there is a 1.5% share that goes into this, and then I'm very much interested in seeing what the impact might be of trimming down the CPC contribution to roughly a similar amount, to see what kind of impact that might have on CPC projects. Other towns are establishing these kinds of investment funds. They make sense. Each community, however, is doing it in a different way, and I think we're genuinely interested in knowing that if we created such a fund here in Yarmouth to help underwrite this significant investment, what kind of impact might it have on CPC? We're interested in having this conversation. We don't have to have it all in its entirety tonight, but I think the idea of inviting you here was to give you some sense of what we're thinking, what we would like to do. We have a cost recovery plan, which many of you have been briefed on. This is a piece of it. And there are some of us that think it's worth exploring the idea of creating this fund and making a split between this and CPC so that we're not overburdening the taxpayer. I think that's an entirely reasonable proposal that is worth examining, studying, and assessing for the next 30, 60 days so that we as a board can make an intelligent decision as to whether or not we should do it. You might have a different proposal. You may have something back that maybe we haven't thought about. So this is the time to begin the conversation, but we don't have a lot of time here, all right? We really don't. This is an incredibly critical issue, and we have to show to our own people, to regulators, to potential litigators, that we're making substantial progress. Everybody has sort of, I think, agrees that this needs to be at the top of the agenda. And as has been said before, the challenge that we face is that we don't have many places to go in terms of underwriting the cost of this. We all know what happened in 2011. The cost of this initiative was put on the property taxpayer. And we all know what happened there. So we have to be creative now. The cost recovery plan that has been discussed before this board and other committees is out there for full discussion, full review. If you want to get a sense of what our thinking is, look at that plan. There's no mystery to it. But we need to start moving forward. I'd like to see a discussion. I'd be very interested in hearing from this committee what it thinks about this structure. Or if you have another idea or another proposal, share that information with us. If there's an impact on potentially future projects, flag that as well. And I share the concern from other board members that if there's some sense that people are making commitments above and beyond what's already been collected or appropriated, then that's disconcerting. But I think it's worth our time now over the next 30 days, maybe 60 days, but we need to do this quickly. We need to really have this conversation now, have this discussion, and then determine whether or not we're going to support doing this, whether it's at this fall town meeting, at the spring town meeting. There's not going to be another town meeting. We need to bring it up at one of these upcoming town meetings. So, and it's important to understand that this is a water infrastructure fund. It will fund drinking water projects. It will fund wastewater and stormwater-related projects. Each of these areas, we have to spend, looking forward, a significant amount of money on in each of these areas. Some of these investments that we need to make may overlap with some of the things that you folks have been doing. But there are other areas where we are going to have to make investments, particularly in the stormwater and the wastewater side. We all know that. But the money's not growing on trees. We need to find other creative ways to do it. I think the cost recovery plan that's been developed is an excellent plan. It's an excellent plan to start. I think it reflects the message that we got from the voters in 2011, and I think it's incumbent on us as a board, and the board is dedicated to doing this, find ways to help make this cost recovery plan a reality. So this is the start of the conversation. I'm sorry that it started off with some sense that maybe we don't appreciate the work that you do. We do. You do great. You do a great job. You've done a great job.
It didn't have to do, it just had to do with what you're asking for. We didn't feel we had time to prepare that.
But we need to start working on that right away, Gary. That's all we're saying. We need to get into this and get into it soon. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Well, so, I'm going to come back to the timing because I still don't have an answer. You know, Mark has suggested 30 to 60 days to reconvene and talk about what the impact to the CPC looks like. That doesn't get it done in time for a fall town meeting.
No.
So it sounds like we're putting this off to the spring town meeting, you know, in which case 30, 60, 90 days after the first of the year, you know, it's...
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I think Rich told us we do not need to start collecting funds from this pot until July of next year.
But we need to have a funding source,
Okay.
which is the 1.5%, and we're not sure that we're correct.
But it's conceivable we could
Happen
meet
at
that
either
objective. in
Either
the spring.
town meeting that could occur.
So we could
Both specify July 1, 2020.
we could vote the fund in the fall and then vote the funding source in the spring.
No, you'd vote them together,
Oh,
but whether it happens in the fall or the spring,
okay.
it doesn't matter. They
The
both,
money isn't going to be going into the fund until July 2020.
So I would make a motion that in order to respect to the Community Preservation Committee's interest in, you know, giving this some thought and presenting to us what the impact would be, that we postpone this until or we put this off until the spring town meeting, and then schedule at some point another meeting between this board and Mr. Ellis's committee to discuss
Well, we
those
have our
impacts.
open meeting, I believe, next week anyways, where we get public input into our projects and what we propose. So
Right.
that is next week.
Do I have a second on Eric's motion?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Go
Ultimately, when this, the investment fund gets enacted, let's say the proposal is exactly as we have in front of us, that there's a 3%, up to a 3% surcharge on real estate tax levy. When and how does that get finalized?
I think you do it at the same time, don't you? You say, we create this fund and we're going to assess 1% or whatever the percentage is, or to say that 1.5% of CPC goes to that fund.
there would be a proposed article that would be presented to the Board of Selectmen for inclusion in the warrant. And so you would vote as to what article you wanted to have in the warrant. So if you wanted a 1.5% wastewater, or water investment infrastructure fund, the article would be worded to create that, state the effective date, state the percentage, and that's what would appear in the town.
So that would be
meeting
part of this vote?
warrant. Yes.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, though,
And then it would go to the ballot.
and then it would have to be voted after town meeting.
Okay.
So, to that point, Mr. Ellis alluded to it, and I just want to clarify. they're not only is there a WIF article proposed at town meeting, that's followed up by another article proposing a reduction to the CPA surcharge.
Right.
Both separate and distinct articles. One could pass, one could fail. Both could fail, both could pass. Likewise, the exact same thing could happen at the ballot. So there is some sense of input and sense of the community that is needed, because you wouldn't want, or perhaps you would, but you could theoretically propose a 1.5% wastewater infrastructure fund, get the town meeting to pass that article, propose a reduction article of the CPC surcharge, have that pass town meeting as an article, then go to the ballot and have the 1.5% WIF pass and the 1.5% CPA reduction fail, and you'd be stuck with a 3% and a 1.5%.
Unless, couldn't you put on the article that the first article was subject to an affirmative vote reducing the CPC from 3% to 1.5%? I think you could do that.
I don't know if you can do that on a ballot.
You know, I think we need to do some consensus building. Not only do we not have time to do public outreach in
There
time
has
for the
been
October.
public, there has been.
Well, you don't have these guys on
Well,
board.
I was at a couple of meetings that Rich has presented this plan to the public, and I was.
I just want to finish my point. If we go to October town meeting and Gary goes to the podium and starts talking about the Armageddon that's going to take place if we reduce his
No,
percentage.
I wanted, the Armageddon is what Rich talked about, that they both fail.
Right. You know, I don't want to be at, I don't want to go to town meeting and be at odds with you and your committee.
Well, we didn't want that either, and we don't plan on doing that. That was why we'd ask for more time, so we get a consensus with us and with the WIF committee.
Well, I'm not sure that we're going to come to a
Right,
consensus.
exactly.
Maybe we won't.
Even in
But
March,
at least,
May.
I think that at least if we allow you and your committee the time to prepare and have a more meaningful discussion than we are tonight, then perhaps we can convince you that your support is important to the success of this project.
Right, and that's what I said when I started tonight. I felt the time was important to us.
So I think out of respect, we need to grant the timing. We may not agree on the final outcome or what the final plan looks like, but I would hope that out of mutual respect, that at least granting some time to think this over and talk about it, we could present a united front to town meeting and help secure the success of the project and the funding as part of the greater picture.
All right. Anybody else before we vote?
I agree.
So we have a motion to put this over until the Springtown meeting, so CPC can get the information that we requested back to us and continue this discussion.
I'd have to check with Tom Kelly. Would like to say something. Do you want to do your vote or have him speak now?
Well,
He's
this isn't a public discussion, but that is Tom Kelly, so have him come up.
Objection.
Let him speak.
Objection. There are other people that want to speak on this issue. I don't think that's fair.
I'm on this committee that you're discussing.
He is. He's the at-large member.
So am
Why
I.
can't he speak? Let him speak.
Go ahead, Tom. You need to come to a mic. You don't have a mic you can bring him, do you?
Mr. Chairman, residents of Yarmouth, I can speak loud if you can't hear me. It won't be recorded, Tom.
Okay.
Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, there's no one living today that knows more about the water supply and the projections of the town of Yarmouth than myself. On September 2nd, 1987, what the Board of Selectmen are proposing now is what the Water Commissioners proposed in that date. That was September 2nd, 1987. And at that time, they wanted to go ahead, and they did separate the elected Board of Water Commissioners and instituted a Department of Public Works. We, for many years prior to 1987, was on the enterprise system. We set money aside each year for contingencies or emergency. Since 1987, what has the Board of Selectmen done to follow that pursuit? We wouldn't be in the problem we have today if they put a set aside, like it was just suggested a little while ago, a fund for emergencies or something in the future. There would not be half the many people living in the town of Yarmouth today if it wasn't the prior, since 1987, prior to that, if it wasn't for the elected Board of Water Commissioners acquiring land for well fields. And we've tried our best, but since I have left the Board of Water Commissioners, and I want to thank you for appointing me to the Community Preservation Committee, there has not been one selectman since I've been on the Board Preservation Committee. There has been not one selectman that has ever attended monthly or special meetings. I know you're busy, but if you assume this office of leaders of this town, don't wait till the last minute to go ahead and do something. I appreciate your time, and I'll be willing to help you any way that I can.
All right, thank you, Tom. Are we ready to vote on the motion?
I think so.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you for your time and having us.
So,
here today.
Gary, why don't you get in touch with Dan, and let's work out at least a tentative time that you'll
Well,
come
like
back.
I said, we have our open meeting this week, and we'll start on this right after that.
Okay.
Okay? And we have our open meeting, as Tom says.
But notwithstanding that we're talking September, like Eric said, let's get, as Mark said, let's keep it going. Let's stay on track with it and get the discussion moving.
More than welcome to come to our open meeting also.
Right.
Okay? Thanks.
Gary, I'm not going to be in my office tomorrow, so you're going to have to wait till Thursday to come yell at me.
I can yell at you all individually, right? But thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, special town meeting warrant article review in fall election date.
I have in your packet much like we do in the spring, a draft document that lists, as we know it today, potentially articles for consideration at the special fall town meeting. It's just this one-page chart.
Maybe.
So we've just eliminated like a third of them, right?
Right. Which is helpful for us to know for planning purposes. Right?
Sure. No, but in all seriousness, we're not, 3, 7, and 8 are now off the table, right?
So I just handed out, this is part 2 of this conversation about the potential election, but going back to the articles, the first one is the DY agreement related to the settlement. We'll have, for the 24th, we'll have full language for these articles for you at September 24th meeting. Number 2 is identified as the DPW building. DHY agreement is off now. FinCom expansion, we have the language for that. It's not less than 7, but not more than 9 is presently the language that we've prepared for consideration for that. Kathy Williams has prepared a memo for you related to the 2 zoning items that they'd like. One is a map amendment, and the second one is a sign amendment, and we'll have a presentation, or Kathy will be available at the September 24th meeting to go over that with you. It has some impact on redevelopment efforts. Number 7 would now be off. The number 8 would be off till the spring potentially. Number 9, the free cash appropriation request due to the recovery efforts. We're tallying those up now. It's getting very close to $1 million as we stand now on actual costs expended to date. There's also another potential 200,000 or 300,000 or 400,000 beyond that for further work that needs to be done. Some of that is going to be an insurance claim, so I don't have all those details. But what I will have for the 24th for you is the request for in an article of the labor expended to date for the activities that we have data on: public works, salaries, police, and whatnot. So we're pulling that together in a more complete format.
The insurance claim.
Golf department, a lot of the infrastructure damage to trees and whatnot there, as it relates, would be able to be claimed as an insurance situation. Also, there's loss of business revenue contemplated there as well at the golf department. So we're working that through the insurance carrier now. And then the other conversation, what I'd like to have with you on the 24th, I don't have all the data analysis yet, but there's a potential opportunity with free cash preliminarily, and I say this very qualified, of free cash certification in the neighborhood of about $3 million, I believe. The finance director has indicated that there's an opportunity, if you would so like, to have an article at town meeting to help pay down some of the debt that would come with the DPW building. As it's planned right now, the DPW building, the proposals for construction would come into us on the 16th of October. So we would have to, if you wanted to use free cash at that time, we have a placeholder for it here. There would be an opportunity during the town meeting if you wanted to apply some free cash. We believe the certification for free cash will be in advance of the town meeting. I just don't have the certified dollar value sum at this moment in time. There's also an opportunity, and I'll discuss this with the director, that some of the Chapter 90 state funding for roadways can be used also that support like the highway part of the building, the garage, and some of that infrastructure. We could also, if you wanted to help assist with the total debt service, some of the Chapter 90 money could also be applied towards that. But again, I'll work with...
Doesn't that money now go into the regular operational budget for DPW?
It goes roadways, roadway repavement and repair work, yeah.
So I'd be afraid of taking that and what that impact would be long-term.
Well, if you'd like to have Ed talk to you about that, we could save it for the 24th, yeah. But I would have Jeff prepare what those options could look like. But again, we won't know what the cost of the building is until we meet again after the middle of October. So this is all getting us ready to have an opportunity to be able to do that. And then there is, from what I understand, a citizens petition circulating out there, and the town clerk expects that the citizens will have their 200 signatures to get a plastic water bottle ban on the town meeting warrant.
What's the deadline for that?
I believe it is going to be, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but it'll be in advance of the 24th, so that's a good question. Is the memo that I sent today by email was that in the charter, according to the charter, we have to put an advertisement out to the public in the form of a newspaper ad, which will go out later this week, and we will tell the citizens that the petition will be due prior to the meeting on the 24th, when you will advance the petitioned articles, or the articles for consideration for the warrant. So it's a pretty quick lead time.
Is this being planned as a special town meeting?
It's a special town
Do we
meeting.
have to open the warrant?
No, it's, an advertisement essentially does that.
So, as a special town meeting, why would we consider anything other than what we want to
It takes,
consider?
it's the charter. If there's 10 signatures. you
200
can-
for a citizen.
Right, if it's 10 signatures, you can put it towards whenever you want, but if there's over a certain percentage, which I think that meets the criteria, it has to go on the next.
That's why the advertisement has to come, to give people the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
We don't
I'd
have
to-
we don't have an option.
I guess I'm,
Actually, if we didn't have a special town meeting called and they had an article that
call
met the
one.
criteria, we would have to call one.
right.
So it's better to place it.
So is that their petition for a
It-
special town meeting?
No, it's for the, to get us to adopt that article back, with some revisions on it for the plastic, single-use plastic water bottle ban.
Well, that's different, though. That's not a petition for a special town meeting.
No, it's
No.
not.
Oh,
They go together, though, Norm.
No.
If somebody has an article that's petitioned with a certain number of signatures, automatically triggers the requirement of us holding a special town
Right.
meeting. It's not two separate actions.
I think the petition has to be a call for a special town meeting, doesn't it?
No, because we already have, we can schedule a special town meeting without a petitioned
Right.
article. The petitioned article just happens to be on the special town meeting that we called.
Well, I'd like to make sure about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and if we didn't have one, they could force the issue and make us have one.
Right. We're having one anyway.
But we're having one
If the
anyway.
petition calls for that,
200
They
signatures.
get enough signatures, yeah.
and
I
the
think it's
wording of the
200.
petition
Yeah.
says that.
Yeah, I'll get that to you.
Okay.
So that's what we know today as articles that are in front of us. We just had a nice deletion of 3.
So, okay, Dan, so the ones that are off are 3, 7, and 8?
3, 7, and 8, yeah.
All right.
So the next part of this conversation would be to call the election. So the clerk has given us a memo as to what the election cycle looks like. And he talks about Tuesday, November 5th, or Friday, November 15th. The Friday, November 15th would give you closer to a standard amount of time that's normally available for absentee ballots to be out circulating in the public. If we ended up having the election on the 5th, there's less time for those absentee ballots to be circulated in the public by
This is
quite a bit.
just for the DPW building.
It was just for the DPW building, that's
I'm
correct.
concerned, how close is the 15th to Thanksgiving?
Well, 15th, I think the Thanksgiving falls 2 weeks later, but the 15th is a Friday, which would be really abnormal, I think, for people voting on a Friday.
Yeah.
Right? But, so,
So this is October, the town meeting is October.
29th.
29th is a
29.
Tuesday, right?
And so if
Yeah.
we went to the 5th after, we'd have to have the ballot printed.
Phil needs a few weeks ahead of time, like 21 days or thereabouts.
So if something changes, though, that makes it problematic.
Well, so part of the problem is, on the ballot question, the dollar value for the building has to appear on the ballot, that's right. So there is this period of time of protest on the, after the 16th. So complicating this is in the contract documents, the apparent low bidder, qualified low bidder, will hold the price for 30 days on the project. So go that out to, like roughly November 16th.
You can't change that when you put the bid out?
No. It's the market right now is pretty volatile, so it's not recommended that anybody would hold it beyond that. So if we ended up having a dollar escalation, it'd be on us to figure out what that escalation means.
The ballot could be worded up to, so if we did something, like if we offset it with free cash or something.
Oh,
at town
yes,
meeting,
you could do something like that, right? Yeah, up to,
always
that's correct.
beneficial to have the right number, though, printed.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Would the DPW building be the only,
Yes, right now, that's what's contemplated,
so
correct.
the debt exclusion on the school, would that be
No.
something that would be contemplated in the spring?
Well, so that's interesting, too, because theoretically, on that one, that doesn't move forward until this court situation gets resolved,
Right,
right?
But we don't have to vote on that
That's
until
right.
that's resolved.
Until that's resolved. That's correct. Because you know what? It could be such that they're successful in court. You never know.
Right.
Yeah.
So is the 15 being driven by the fact that it's a day before the 16th, even though it's a Friday?
Yeah, it's the combination, I think, of allowing absentee ballots to have more time to circulate and being very close, the 15th falling just before that 30-day deadline of bid openings.
And what's the objection to the 12th?
To the
Holiday on, the 11th is a holiday,
Day on
maybe.
Monday?
I believe part of the problem was that precincts 5 and 6, maybe, the facility was not available. However, if we decided to go, apparently Mattakey School used to be the voting location there. If you decided that you wanted to try to do it in a day in between there, we'd have to work something out with the school.
I think people would lose their minds if you started changing the precinct location.
That's what the thought of the clerk was, yeah.
The schools might not like
Right,
the vote there either.
during the school day, correct. We don't have to obviously make a decision tonight, but this is what's in front of us right now. Just I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
I could read the charter again, because I thought we had to open the warrants that allowed for the petition articles. I thought that's how it's always been. It's usually that way for annual, but special, I mean, if we want somebody to do it before.
We haven't had a special in
It's
8
been-
years.
Well, it hasn't been 8 years. It's been a few years, though.
Been a long time.
Been a long time, yeah.
So we don't need to decide
No.
on a date tonight?
No, that's correct.
All right.
Right. I just wanted to make sure you knew all those moving targets there.
All right, anything else on this? Okay, we'll go to board and committee actions.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Kathy Williams, Town Planner.
Oh,
We
you
have the
wanna do the
planning board
zoning
here to
pieces?
kind of- We're looking for some input from the board,
Yeah.
if that's possible, on the
Have you
zoning
had a
article.
public hearing on this yet?
No, we have not. But some of it involves a policy change to the Board of Selectmen's
Signs.
community event policy. And if you guys weren't interested in doing that, then that would really reflect on whether we would even advertise for that part of the public hearing.
This advertising, I think, is driven by the drive-in site activities.
Yeah.
Well, the planning board wasn't planning on having any articles of special town meeting, but a couple things came up that we thought it might be prudent to take a look at. One of them had to do with some zoning map amendments related to the Great Island Plaza that has a new owner, and they were interested in doing some redevelopment, and they were hoping to have an underlying zoning change. I think it's explained in the memo. And then the other one had to do with some difficulties that were experienced at the Country Fest at the drive-in site, where they were unable to utilize the 32-square-foot community event sign because they were not considered nonprofit or religious or civic. So what we were proposing to do is to make some amendments to allow for for-profit events on town-owned property to have the larger community event sign.
And I believe those larger signs would be at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen, correct?
If it was going to be on town-owned property, then yes, you would, but the whole idea was to have it outlined in the community event, edits to the community event sign policy by the Board of Selectmen.
So he or she knowing when they rent the property, what they can do for signage at the site.
Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Well, they had the police one out there the last time.
And wasn't there supposed to be a third site for community?
Yes, and that was one of the other things of maybe taking this opportunity
Announcements.
to add a third community information board. We have, the bylaw limits it to 2, and we have those now, one at DUI and one that's going in at the chamber property. And maybe the idea of, it's obviously up to the Board of Selectmen where that would go, but thinking that it might go at the drive-in site
Yeah.
in the future, not quite now.
I think, I read these amendments over. To me, they're all reasonable, and I don't have any issue with any of them.
How long are we going to call it the drive-in site?
forever. until-
Forever, because it was a drive-in.
I like to call it the marinas.
I like to call it the failed marina site.
It's like,
Here's my life, I'll never get back.
it's like the free church.
Failed marina site.
It's like the free church, Brad. The free church. It's no longer a church, but it's still called the free church.
The new church, yeah.
So, I mean, names have a way of sticking around these parts.
We just want to make sure these two were okay with you before we hold a public hearing and all the rest.
What's the proposed redevelopment for the Great Island Market property?
Well, they own 3 parcels there, where the plaza is with the post office, the vacant building, and then the parcel behind. I think they want to renovate those buildings and make them
Hallelujah.
the retail that they used to
Yeah.
be. And hopefully these zoning amendments will allow them to do a better site design and have the parking more in the rear, maybe having a nice green space in the front, and eliminating some of the curb cuts that are really close to the intersection there on Winslow Gray.
Does part of it include donating the corner on Winslow Gray to the town so we can straighten out that intersection?
Those have not been part of the discussions.
Could
So
it be? In consideration of our support for this article.
So these were not requested by the owner, these are.
But that one was requested by the owner, and we were also,
Green space and closing curb cuts?
the
were-
Great Island Plaza
Mhm.
the redevelopment was suggested by the owner. They had indicated to me that they weren't going to be able to do some of those things, like green up the front and eliminate that curb cut, because they couldn't, with the zoning, some of it is R25, they couldn't put the parking in the rear. It's all VCOD, VC1, all of the properties. But she didn't want to develop under that. She wanted to do something a little bit simpler and renovate existing buildings now.
And just to answer, my understanding the DOT said that that intersection, while horrible, part of the major problem is not the road layout anymore, but it's the timing of the lights. The lights don't talk to each other, so they're hoping to get newer
They've been
lights
trying
there.
to do that for years, and we've been resistant because we want them to realign the whole thing and make the problem all better instead of taking the easy way out.
Agree.
Don't you
We were
remember the
supposed to be-
commission came before us years ago and said, well, you can spend $1 million on the roads, or it'll cost you $50 to retime the lights. Which do you want to do?
Yeah, we were supposed to be on the tip list, I think, in 2020. We had the hearings in 2014, but we just all came down to cash and timing, and then ownership of the land.
Well, anything we can do to help that redevelop would be great.
So you're
We're good?
You're good.
Sounds
Thank
like
you
it,
so
yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
On the committee side of things, we have a resignation, Rennie Hammond, stepping down from the Water Resources Advisory Committee. So
Accept
I'm
with
recommending
thanks.
that we accept with
Second.
thanks. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And the next item deals with the Community Preservation Committee. And we have 3 appointments. Each are 3-year terms extending in July 2022. So I'm recommending that we appoint George Slammer to the Historical Commission's representative on the CPC, Paul Huggins, the Conservation Commission representative to the CPC, and Christine Marzigliano, Open Space Committee representative to the CPC.
All through July 20.
All through July 20.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mark. Upcoming agenda review is next. I got an email that I want to talk to the board about for a scheduling matter from RASWAC. They want to appear on the 19th of November to discuss an article that they intend to bring forward. And it's to prohibit polystyrene, in the packaging of prepared foods. In the series of emails, it says such a ban is important not only to prevent more plastic from getting into the environment, but Would also improve the health of Yarmouth residents. And they say that they have the support of the Board of Health. They want to make a short presentation and get input from the Board of Selectmen. I got an email from Linda asking me if it was okay to put them on, and while I personally don't have a problem with it, I rather we do this together, so want to know what the board thinks about that. If that date's not convenient, they also said they could be accommodated in the month of December. So, I know that's a ways out,
What
but
was the date, the first date they gave?
November 19th.
It's vacant now. There's nothing on.
Yeah, if you look at the
Yeah.
12th and 26th, they're scheduled for no meeting, so it's that week right in between the two.
Yeah, things get more and more congested as we move along. I think you're better off trying to get it in early, and then, you know, if something happens, kick it down further, but, you know, try to get it, yeah.
So you think you want it earlier than the 19th, or you think the 19th is an early enough
I
date?
think that's probably fine.
That's fine, okay.
Perspective.
All right.
But we have really only one meeting in November?
No, I think there's two, isn't there?
15th.
We wanted to talk to you about,
We have to have another one.
you have to have two, right? So we didn't, you know, we were looking at perhaps the 12th also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would we do,
There's no,
you know, I changed my vacation in Spokane, so I could be at the town meeting, and now you're saying you're going to throw a meeting in. Just a little frustrated with scheduling.
well, so originally, the election issue came up on the 5th, but we don't normally have a meeting when there's an election. But then, with further review, as mentioned before, November 15th was an option due to all the DPW building
So what's
issues.
the date you're not available, Norm?
No, I'm leaving on the 30th, and I will not be back for 2 weeks. I'll be gone through the 13th or 14th, so,
So October 30?
yeah.
So you have
doesn't
to
make
get an
any
absentee
difference.
ballot. But we're not going to meet till the 19th anyway, right?
Right. No, I'm not worried about that in terms of the absentee ballot. I'm just a little frustrated with the scheduling, that's all. So, yeah, if you got to meet on the 12th, you got to meet on the 12th.
We don't need, there's no meeting on the 12th. We're going to
Well,
meet on the
we
19th.
need
No,
two
we have
meetings.
to do
Have to
another
meet
one
one more
because we
meeting.
only have one in November. We have to have two in November.
It's either meeting on the
Ah.
12th or the 26th.
Right. Why can't we do it the 26th?
That's a holiday week? No?
That's, I believe, Thanksgiving week, and that's, we don't have a lot of labor,
You're talking about
town
here.
hall at that week
Yeah.
to put anything on. That's the concern there.
That's the week of Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I will let Linda know then, not hearing any objections, that that's okay for them to come in on the 19th of November. All right? That's what I'm gonna
And
do.
then we have to pick another day?
Yeah.
Yes.
When are you away in November?
I am away the first 2 full weeks of November.
So we'll have to do it the 26th. We'll have to meet the 19th and the 26th.
I'm away the 4th to the 15th.
Yep, that's what we gotta do. That's what we gotta do then.
Oh, wait a minute.
You in the wrong month?
No, but I am away, I'm away that week of the 26th, too.
You guys are like
Just
a
gonna- I
little
might just
Leo
take the
over
whole month
here.
off.
I'll be here all month.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to decide tonight. Let's push that down a little bit till
It
the
looks
next
like, well, if we get 3 members, we're gonna have to do it on the 12th, right? I don't see any other option. Because, well, no, Norm would be back on the 26th.
Yeah.
Eric wouldn't.
Yeah.
So we'd have 4, potentially.
One time, I don't take any.
But that is that holiday week, so I don't know. All right, we'll go back, we'll revisit that next time. So,
Why was the 19th selected as, I mean, why not the 12th and the 26th?
We generally try to stay away from, like I said, that holiday week of Thanksgiving has become one where there's not a lot of human resources left in the building, so it's, we try to avoid that.
Sounds perfect to me.
So the 12th, Norm's not here and Eric's not here, right?
Well, you're ruling out the.
I'll be here, though, so if you want to have it that week,
fifth as well.
I'm fine with that.
You're ruling out the 5th as well?
Yeah, because there's an election.
We could have it the 5th.
The 15th.
But that's, that's a decision for, what works for all of you, so
Sounds like we should button this up next time around.
I agree with that. Yeah.
All right.
One thing about the upcoming agendas, I am not going to be at the meeting next Thursday night, the 19th.
Well, how about you give us the dates you're
That's an
available?
extra one.
That's an extra
I
one.
have my son has a school thing,
Call it
so
November.
I'll be here Tuesday the 17th to hear CDM. I just won't be at the joint meeting on the 19th.
Remember, that's at the Harwich Community Center, too, by the way, not at the
So-
Dennis Council on Aging.
All right.
If you're, if you're looking at the 24th, just to update you on a couple things here, we revisited the parking situation from last meeting, and a couple things came to mind. One is there is a sign, an internal sign committee that in the past has developed the recommendations to advance where signs get put up. So I've looked into that. 2 of the 3 members are actually no longer with the town. I'm trying to get an answer as to how we can quickly reconstitute it, but that's okay. But the more problematic issue is statutorily, Phil Magnuson went back into the state regulation, and what ends up happening is we need to better clarify in the regulations that $35 charge on one side, $20 charge on another side. It is kind of complicated, but I've asked Phil and Jay Tallerman to prepare for you. I think an easier way to do this is to simply, in another part of the regulations, just not allow parking and have a tow-away zone on that easterly side. So we're going to revise the language for you to reconsider that at Center Street so that it makes clearer sense and is also legitimate with the statute.
I don't think we were saying there would be no parking on the westerly side.
No, so the way it works now, so the way it was explained to me by the police, if a car were to park on a side of a road and not leave 10 feet of passable space on a lane.
Another issue.
No, what happens is it allows discretion by the police officer.
Right.
So basically, anybody could get a ticket there at any time because you didn't allow for 10 feet. If we go in a different set of the regulation and say, clearly, this side, east side from, I think it was Homer's Dock to Alms Road, east side, in the $20 fee schedule, no parking, tow-away zone, you're okay there. So it got enough confusion that I felt that I wasn't comfortable with what was motioned on the floor to be able to stand up.
So what we simply motioned was that the west side would be a $35 zone.
Yeah.
So why would there be?
You can't have 2 different zones, so, because theoretically, Center Street, the other side would be a different fee, because where you added that was a $35 ticket. The rest of the town, if a ticket gets issued, is $20 ticket.
Right.
And you can't do that, apparently, from what I understand.
The rest of the street?
Yeah. Any other street where you obstruct the lane is a $20 ticket. And you can't have the same street have 2 different fees associated with no parking, is how it was explained
Well,
to
why
me.
do we even have the $35 then?
Well, because we put it in the section of the regulation that was ways to the beach. Ways to the beach was the $35, because
Yeah,
what Phil's
because
point was
beaches had
to
a
raise it more than the daily fee to go to the beach, to make it have a penalty. Because right now, if we didn't raise that fee, you could park on the side of the road, and it's the same as if you got a beach sticker. So we needed to clean that up legally wise, is what I would say.
Still confused, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still confused.
It was complicated, to say the least.
You have to look at the wording of some of those signs, too. There's one of them on the south side which says, no dogs and alcohol allowed on the beach. So
You can have one or the other, but not both.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you,
You just can't have both.
I'm telling you that if
That's a good one.
if I was
Drunken dogs.
representing somebody that got a ticket, I would guarantee them a result. You have to have both. You have to have your beer in his hand and your dog, and you let your dog go.
So there's that issue. The other issue was, we wanted to revisit with you again the parking clerk issue and have Jay work through that with you as it relates to administrative concerns on due process. For a lot of different reasons, internally after the meeting, we had a discussion. It makes a lot more sense to keep it with the, under administrative procedures with the entity that issues the tickets, because then the hearing can be done quickly right there by a member of the police department that has all the access to the information that you need, as opposed to sending it over to a different town department who has no connection to what was going on.
You know, I'd have to
I'm glad it was so
respectfully
simple.
disagree with him. I mean, I don't think you have an appeal right if the same agency that gives you the tickets are in the appeal.
Well, that's why I wanted to have Jay talk to you about
Man.
that.
I'd like to talk to him about that.
Yep. And the second one, or the last one on this particular topic, is this Ocean Club. They apparently have had an encroachment on town property and the seawall for many, many years. And so the remedy for that is to have the board potentially consider giving them a license to have their seawall or a retaining wall on town property revocable at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen. Essentially, it's been there forever. The map shows it. They went ahead and did some improvements. They found out afterwards it was on town property, and this is a legal remedy for them. And Jay will walk you through that. We're going to get a briefing
Why
from
do
their
they
engineer.
need that?
They brought it up as part of like cleaning up the property as it relates, because if they wanted to apparently have a refinancing or some kind
That's
of
what I
loan on
thought. Maybe it
Yeah.
came up in a title issue.
Yeah, so it stood out as clearly a problem, and they wanted to find out what legal remedy they had.
Is it the entire seawall?
It's a good chunk of it. I think if I remember the case correctly, it kind of like meanders out on a straight line, but it's like I don't know what you call it. It's like a trapezoidal almost type of thing. So it's not a lot of property, but it was one of those, if you wanted to do something different than that, you'd have to go through a disposition process, put it to town meeting if you wanted to give it to them. So the easy way to remedy it for them legally is through offering them a license to.
Can we talk about the precedent of that at the same time?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah,
Is
yeah,
it,
yeah.
I'm really concerned about.
Yeah, and you should be. I mean, but a license simply is a permission that's revocable at the will of the person that gives it.
That's
So, in other words, the town's saying, you have permission to do it, but
Yeah,
no
but-
guarantees as tomorrow. I mean, anytime we tell you,
What happens if somebody falls off it? We own it? It's our responsibility?
well, you have to have an indemnification agreement that they, you
It's
know,
not
that they
really
would
complicated.
ensure that
Yeah.
and be responsible for any injuries to that. I don't think that should be a problem, but it's a great point, and it should be part of the discussion.
That's why I wanted to have Jay discuss it with you while he was here. The other one is the Parkers River Bridge. I wrote you a brief email on that. That contractor's getting ready to go. That is one that has a defined period of time. It's a laydown area, also the area for the construction office. It's a small segmented location. There'll be a map that'll be presented with you. And it would, once the project's over, the equipment goes away, and that's the end of that license, so. We did a similar thing for Mayflower Place when that was underway,
We did it for High
Yeah.
Bank.
so
We own half of High Bank?
I don't know offhand.
I think we might have done it.
So that's while Jay is here, and the public hearing for construction and demolition debris, Jeff Colby is away, but I'm not sure if Ed knows any more detail. We may not need to have that hearing, is that true, Ed?
That's correct.
Okay.
So September 17th and 19th, I was confused with my calendar last time, and I guess I'm confused again. We have 2 meetings that week on wastewater?
So the 17th is a Tuesday meeting, that's with the Water Resources Advisory Committee to brief you in advance of the 19th Tri-Town meeting. There's so much material available for that meeting, it was thought that it would be better if you had an opportunity to get a briefing on that from Dave Young as to where we're at with that, and that was going to be a 5 to 7 o'clock meeting if you wanted it, or we could move it to 6 if you'd like, but it was designed to be a workshop only to take in information in advance of the Thursday night meeting.
Whereabouts in Howard's is it going to be?
The community center. The meeting Tuesday's here, though.
Right.
Yeah, 17. So really, if you want to do it at 5, let me know. If you don't, we'll make it at 6. We just have to notice it, that's all.
Tuesday's meeting?
Tuesday's meeting, yeah. If it works better for you at 5.
Prefer earlier.
So that's where we're
Right,
at.
so then you have the 24th, you have DHY discussion and possible vote. There's going to be no vote.
I think that'll end up going out based on the vote you took tonight
So
to
that'll
move
be
DHY out. That'll be off, right?
When are we going to have goals back on the agenda?
It's on there for October, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing here.
Committee handbook and goals?
The
Wendy?
committee handbook, well, the goals were, I thought it was a motion to merge the golf into goal number 10, keep them to 10. We were going to reissue you a revised narrative as it relates to that. We just haven't had time to work on that right now. But we'll get to it.
All right. Does anyone else have anything on the agenda? All right. Individual items. Who wants to start?
Don't have anything.
Well, tomorrow we have, tomorrow is 9/11, and I believe there are events, they're not in our packet.
7:30 at YPD, and then there's one at 9:45 at Station 3.
Okay. Can you say that again, tomorrow?
7:30 at YPD, and then 9:45 at Station 3, YFD Station number 3.
Okay. Anything else, Tracy?
No, sir.
Norm?
No, I'm all set.
Mark?
I'm set.
I'm all set, too. Town administrator items.
In the consent agenda, we have the annual requests that come up for the Seaside Festival are located there, also for Sea Dog Pub. And then also the thank you letters, Mr. Stone, are in the signature folder for you for all the different entities that assisted us with the tornado.
I saw the online version of them.
Yep.
Has everybody looked at those?
I don't see him in there.
No, they're in here.
They're in the signature
were-
folder, yeah.
They were in a special attachment to the,
Oh, it says for you.
We got the drafts in an email last week.
yeah. I assume these are the same.
Yeah,
You've been
yeah, we
watching.
added, Representative Keating was added to the list. That was the only addition.
Tracy, what was that young lady's name that we both were talking about who was involved right from the very beginning? She was, I think, the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Yeah, we got her, Jean Bonassa.
Was she in there, too?
Yeah, she's in there,
Okay, I
yeah.
want to make sure she
Yeah,
was included.
Undersecretary, yeah. We pretty much,
Undersecretary.
yeah, we covered it, yeah.
I just scanned them quickly, and then I wasn't sure whether she was included or not.
She was, yep.
I guess I do have something I wanted to ask about.
Okay, Norm has, go ahead.
Yeah, coming back to the whole goal situation, I guess, I'd sent an email, as I said in the email, the goals that were outlined, in my view, are nothing more than expressions of areas of interest. Saying we're interested in economic development, for example, is just simply that. It's not an expression of a goal. The goal is related to specifics as to what we're going to achieve, what we'd like to achieve. And I'd say further on that, the Massachusetts Council of Select Boards has a manual for selectmen, and it details that. It talks about the staff creating an action plan with specific goals and action plan for the board to approve. You know, and I pose some other specific examples. You know, you get down through our the areas of interest, and again, very non-specific goals are identified. There just isn't anything, and I don't view that as an effective way for our board to set goals. I think the goals need to be quantified and specific, and I don't think without that we're setting sail with an enough force. We're just drifting. So that's my input.
Dan, do you have any updates?
No, that's, we covered a lot of bases today on that. I just need a motion to, a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.